All right, so today we have Sudip Roy. He is co-founder and CTO at Adaption Labs. That's adaption with an A, so adaptionlabs.ai. Taglines are the days of monolithic AI are over. Most AI is frozen in place. It doesn't adapt. And so AI that adapts to them. Oh, so people around the world are looking for AI that adapts to them, not the other way around. And so with that, Sudeep, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ben, for having me. Looking forward to an exciting conversation.
All right. So you are a seasoned veteran in this highly hyped up AI space. Uh, so you have battle scars from Google to Cohere. So what did you see firsthand that convinced you that this bigger or better thing, which is loosely called scaling, was hitting a wall?
Yeah, so I think one of the things which we noticed having worked with a lot of enterprises is people still actually fail in their AI adoption journey because AI fails in like the last 5% of the cases, which actually is somewhat maskable in the consumer space. But in enterprises, that last mile reliability is really what actually blocks them from productizing AI in many cases. And they attempt to solve it by either rigorous prompt tuning, where they try to exercise control and spend hundreds of hours. But those prompt structures are very specific to a particular model or a particular version. The alternative strategy is to try something like fine tuning, which requires a good amount of high quality data. And again, is somewhat of an expensive and slow process. It can take weeks to months to actually get a good fine-tuned model that then you can productize. So across all of these themes is the effective desire to exercise more control, but that unit cost of adaptation, both in terms of like the expense of it, but also in terms of the time it takes to do that adaptation, is really high. It's of the order of weeks to months, depending on whether you make an intervention at the pre-training or the post-training phase. And that's fundamentally the problem that we're trying to solve with Adaption Labs, which is lower the unit cost of adaptation significantly so that adaptation of AI can happen seamlessly. And that's our bet on gradient-free approaches, which are more inference time strategies that can still enable a lot of users to exercise control and bridge that last mile quality gap.
So let me drill down a little bit on what you just said,
Sure.
which is basically that last mile, that additional 5% of of cases that the whatever application you're building doesn't seem quite to work. And by the way, if you actually know which 5% they were, then you would deploy. The problem is you don't know which 5%
Exactly. I think that's one
right?
aspect of adaptation or the lack of adaptability. I think there are a couple of other aspects of lack of adaptability. One is a second one, I would say, is as you mentioned, over time, the distribution of the workload that you're sending to the AI might change, in which case you do want AI to also seamlessly adapt to those changing distributions. And that, again, is another blocker that we have seen. And the third, I would say, is proportional allocation of compute based on the task complexity. Right now, the dominant way of deploying AI is I have this big model that I'm going to deploy, and anything and everything that I want to do, irrespective of how complex my task is, goes to that one model. And I think we need to move towards a world where the compute allocation happens in a much more proportional way based on the complexity of the task. So these are like, I guess, three different elements of control that we want to provide to the users.
So there's another aspect, Deep, of the scaling loss, which is basically, all right, so I can't deploy right now because this model doesn't seem quite to work 5% of the time, and I don't know which 5% it won't work. But I hope, or I think, based on what I'm reading, that the foundation model providers continue to improve. So then maybe I'm imagining things, and next month this thing will work. So is that a good strategy?
No,
It's
so
kind of a throwing it over the wall strategy, you know?
yeah, it's I think to some extent, I'm sure like you have also seen, I think there's a general consensus on the field that the publicly available data on which you can train these larger models or scale these models is almost out, right? So, and I think a lot of the remaining data actually is locked within the enterprises, and that's like high value data. But in order to be able to like leverage that data, which is important for that last mile customization, you have to have AI that continually learns in a secure environment that makes enterprises comfortable to be able to like deploy that, as opposed to waiting for some frontier labs to produce the next version of the model, which largely, I'm not saying that there will be no improvement, but the improvements have gotten to a point of somewhat diminishing returns if you consider the amount of cost and compute that is spent towards producing that new version of the model, as opposed to the quality improvements that you see. So there are just alternative ways of bridging that quality gap in a much more seamless and without waiting for 6 months for the next version of the model.
By the way, as you were talking earlier, I guess I kind of realized, oh, I'm not imagining myself because I'm not imagining things because I had a hard time pronouncing the company name, honestly, Adaption. But then it's really the word is adaptation, right?
The word is so adaption is actually
Is it a
English
proper
dictionary word
word?
as well. It is
It's
a
a
proper
proper
word,
word.
yes,
Well,
and it
yeah,
means
yeah.
the same as adaptation.
I guess adoption is the one that's more commonly used, right? So, but it means
Adaptation is
something.
the one that's more commonly used, but yes, adaption is a legitimate word, which means the same thing.
By the way, so adaptation. Let's drill
Yes.
down on this word adaptation. So there is another word out there or term that people use, which is post-training.
Yeah.
So what is adaptation basically post-training renamed?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that post training is a technique, and
Or
adaptation.
collection of techniques, right? So fine tuning is in
Sure, post
there,
training.
maybe RLHF is in there,
Yes.
distillation is in there, right? So
Absolutely, yeah. And I think post training itself usually has the connotation of being a approach that requires some form of gradient update, right? In the sense that your model weights are still the central artifact, and through training, you're trying to update it. Whereas our approach is slightly broader in the sense that, sure, we will explore post-training as part of the recipes, but we believe there's a much broader set of just gradient-free approaches, which can also be quite powerful in inducing some of these changes. And the advantage of the gradient-free approaches is that they can be implemented really fast to give a much more interactive experience of adaptation.
so can you give our listeners kind of an intuition around this gradient-free approaches? By intuition, I mean, uh, why should they work?
Yeah, so actually, if you look at it's not even a question of why should they work. There's actually been a number of research papers, including some by Sarah, our
Yeah, yeah.
co-founder of
No,
Adaption,
but research
which effectively
papers
say
research papers may still not be intuition, Sudip.
yes.
So in plain language, explain why this gradient-free approaches do work, I guess.
Yes, so I think in simple language, I think a gradient free, firstly, I guess, what are the advantages? As I mentioned, if you do things gradient free, you can do things much more interactively. If the user can actually try one thing, and then at this next moment, if based on whatever the instructions is, you can actually change the behavior, and they can see that change in the behavior of the system, right? So that's kind of like the advantage. In some ways, you get that experience to a limited form through prompt engineering today. But with gradient-free adaptation, you expose a much richer set of techniques. And the intuition behind why it works is a few different things. Foundation models themselves have their own personalities and their own, I guess, specific way of instructing them that they cater to, which means that a particular prompt that you write for one model doesn't transfer over to another model. So by using some of these gradient-free approaches, you're effectively removing a lot of that complexity from the users into an algorithmic layer that sits on top of one or more models. And that algorithmic layer can make the decisions to choose either the appropriate model, to use a combination of models, or to even possibly dynamically merge models in order to accomplish the task that the user wants. So it removes a lot of the complexity from the users into an algorithmic layer that sits in between the users and the models.
So based on what you said, it seems like it's some combination of routing and orchestration, and then aggregation.
I would say those are like some elements of it, but as I mentioned, like there's a much richer set of techniques as well, even which go beyond that. Those are, I guess, more static techniques, which are not necessarily continuously learning. There's also other techniques which allow you to continuously learn over time.
So curious listeners, what you're saying is curious listeners will find a bunch of papers around this.
Yes, they
Just
should.
like there's papers around post-training, there's papers about adaptation.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a number of interesting papers, some of which have been written by Sarah, but some of them, I think in general, the community also has published a number of interesting papers in this space.
And in the case of post-training, Sudip, to some extent, you need some access to the model or model weights, right? So
Yeah.
what kind of access do you need to the model for adaptation? Let's say, hey, I'm really sold on this model. It doesn't quite work for my use case, but I want to adapt it, but then it's proprietary. So
Yeah, so I think we need to kind of move away from just using proprietary models exactly because of that reason. Like an average enterprise today actually uses at least like 3 models, and usually has some sort of a gateway where they route to one of the providers. And that's because they run into these walls when they are using these black box models, and they cannot change behavior, or they're doing it for cost efficiency. And with with adaptation, it's like much more easier to actually just abstract that away. And going back to your question of, do you actually need to have access to the weights themselves? In some ways, yes and no. But I think, as I mentioned, like we view adaptation as a different problem in the sense that we don't want it to be very model or weight centric, but there are a lot of algorithmic interventions that can be made even if you don't have access to the model weights directly. If you do have access to the model weights, there are certain techniques that open up, but model weight access is largely when you do things in a gradient update manner as opposed to in a gradient free manner.
So in other words, adaptation, you can do some adaptation even if the model is proprietary.
Yes.
It's better if the model is open, whatever notion of open it is, open weights, but the more open, the better.
Yeah.
And what about, so in terms of some of these post-training techniques, right? So some people have already tried fine-tuning, and there the workflow, like you said, the expensive thing is the fine-tuning data set, but then after that, the actual fine-tuning tends to be on the cheaper side, I would say. Obviously cheaper than pre-training. And reinforcement learning workflow is complicated, limited to advanced teams, and and compute intensive. So where is the adaptation in terms of cost and complexity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say if you have a workflow that is fairly static and it's not going to change for a long period of time, then and if you are able to like collect good high quality data, then I think fine tuning is a good solution. You can actually fine tune a small model on that high quality data, have that model be deployed, and it will work for you for
As long as
possibly
the
like multiple,
as
yeah,
long
as
as
long
the
as the distribution.
distribution doesn't change.
Yeah. So for instance, if you have like a specific type of form and you just
Yeah.
want to extract
Yeah.
data out of that form, and that form has been used for like whatever tens of years, just, yeah, fine tune. If you have that high quality data, sure. I think often a barrier to fine tuning is actually lack of access to having high quality data. And that's one of the problems which we want to solve through our adaptive data pillar as well. Yeah. So that's, I guess, fine tuning. RL, it's definitely interesting. As you mentioned, I think RL and getting value out of RL requires a certain level of skill set and expertise, which is fairly limited. And you don't necessarily need reinforcement learning for all of the reliability issues that I mentioned that enterprises still face.
So, the family of adaptation techniques, where does it fall in the cost and complexity?
So in the cost, it's actually fairly low cost because it's all inference time. So it's as opposed to fine tuning, it's just
That's
all
right.
happening
Yeah.
in pretty much like real
Basically,
time, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of complexity, again, like even if the techniques may be complex, the products that we are going to put out in the market are going to abstract those complexities away from the end user, so that the users don't have to actually worry about some of these techniques.
So like I said, so in the fine tuning case, the people know what they need to do, which is collect sample data. So in the adaptation case, what do I need to do?
I think you should know about what you want AI to accomplish and let the system actually figure how to deliver on that on its own.
Do I need to sit down with the system and give it feedback? Or how?
Yes, I think it can certainly learn if you are able to get feedback, which is why I think one of our pillars is also adaptive interfaces, because we believe that having that right interface to show the information in a manner that enables users to provide feedback is really crucial part of this continuous adaptation, which is why, of the three pillars of adaptation, one is adaptive data, which solves like the lack of data problem for fine tuning, the adaptable intelligence, which is more around continuous learning on its own, and the adaptable interfaces, which makes it seamless to gather that feedback that can then be folded back into the algorithmic layer to do this continuous improvement.
Now, Adaption Labs was launched a few weeks ago, so obviously the product is still being built. They're hiring. Go to their website. But if you were to fast forward 12 months from now, I'm an analyst. I'm assuming assuming I'm not a programmer. I can use your product to help this AI get better at whatever task I'm having it do. So what do you envision the workflow will be there?
I think we have been in existence for a few months now, but we will be putting out some of our products out in the market very soon. It'll be more, I guess, targeted towards developers, just the first pillar product, which is more around adaptive data. So people who want to potentially, do or either synthesize or improve on data quality, mostly from post-training perspective. They are the ones who are going to find that product useful. But we also feel like a lot of the enterprises actually will be able to like leverage that product to be able to produce high quality data for many different things. So that's something which we're going to put out fairly soon. Followed by other products which may be more seamlessly usable which is, I guess, it's still a little early to discuss, but yeah, it'll be usable by more of the
So
consumer audience as
the
well.
data product, do you have a concrete example of how
Not
it would work? Yeah,
Not yet, because
not
we
yet.
haven't still launched the product.
Yeah.
Of course, I can actually. So I want to like hold back a bit, and but it's coming soon. So
But
yeah,
you
more than
said
happy to come back and talk more about it.
you hinted that, this is a product that might help me if I'm doing some sort of post training. Well, kind of the classic post training is fine tuning. And
Yeah.
there, the problem is I may need a few thousand examples, but, I only have time to generate 100. So it's just the kind of thing that will help me get to the few thousand examples.
Yes, I'll probably just leave it at that for now,
Okay.
but the product will be out soon. But yes, I think that's definitely in the spirit of what the product will enable you to do.
And how much of what you folks plan to do will be open source?
We want to develop products which encapsulate a lot of the technologies, and we are not looking to open source anything in the immediate roadmap. However, we are one of the frontier AI labs, and we do take pride in the technology and the research that we do, and we'll be more than happy to share that with the wider community through either blog posts or research papers as and when that opportunity arises.
The other thing you folks can do is you can just make sure that people use your API, whatever API it is, right? So like
Yeah,
for this data product, so your
yes,
API for adaptation of data
yeah,
will be the default, just like the OpenAI API is what people use for inference. And then it seems like the Tinker Labs API for fine tuning is
yes.
becoming popular. So you can kind of make sure your API is super popular, right?
Yes, we definitely want to get feedback from users to adapt. And if that's the thing that the users would want, we're more than happy to provide that.
So what was the moment you decided to build this yourselves? Because you guys could have built this at your former company, which people can look up, but because it's the kind of thing that as a startup, then now you have to chase customers, users, as well as developers. Uh, and on top of that, obviously build something interesting, right? So what inspired you to chuck it all and do it yourself?
Yeah, both Sarah and me have always been inspired by working on like challenging and interesting problems, and this definitely feels like one which was like fairly challenging, and we wanted to do it with the right level of ambition, and in order to do that, it required a single-minded focus, which is kind of hard to do in the context of another organization which may have already an established focus area. So we wanted to create that space, and the best way to tackle this problem was to go about it on our own. Yeah, we have built a pretty good team now, which is aligned with our philosophy and mission. And yeah, we are full steam ahead right now.
So at your previous company, you were at the forefront of helping enterprises adopt AI, right? So you saw all of the uh, challenges they faced, right? So
Yeah.
uh, I imagine a healthy chunk of them were trying some sort of retrieval augmented generation, um, and now agents, right?
Yeah.
So where would adaptation fall? How would adaptation fall help an enterprise that's already deep into, say, RAG or building or already using some agents?
Yeah, I think in some ways we are complementary in the ecosystem to either agents or RAG-based systems, right? So we are rather actually changing more about at the modeling layer instead of just in some ways, like RAG is solving the or attempting to solve the context problem and trying to get the right information into the model layer. Agents, they are again like trying to make actionable decisions, but the core, I guess, brain of the system is still in the model layer, right? Agents are more about like keeping the context, having memory, and being able to actually take action, but the action or all of the decisions are still offloaded onto the model layer. So what our focus is on making that modeling layer better, but also do it in a manner that is not just tied to a particular model, but tied to the objective that you want to accomplish. Whether the objective is set by the agent or by some other other entity in the application layer, it shouldn't matter much.
So based on what you said earlier, you definitely benefit if there's a healthy ecosystem of open weights models, correct?
We do, yes.
Yeah.
Of course,
So then
yes.
the challenge right now is that the ecosystem of open weights models is mainly Chinese. And I was just talking to someone at lunch, actually, selling into enterprise and defense. And uh, he said it's still a no-fly zone for for many enterprises and especially defense-related companies, right? So the fact that the open weights model is from China. So on the other hand, there are some new efforts, right? So there's Alan AI seems to be releasing a model every now and then. Uh, Google Gemma, obviously not as good as Gemini. So ultimately, but you still need that pipeline of open
Yeah.
weights models. And Sudeep, where we're gonna get these open weights models that are not from China?
So that's an interesting question for sure. So I think I would say that definitely not all of the open weight models are from China. There's like also a lot of emphasis in other parts of the world,
But
including in Europe.
the best open weights models are from China right now, right?
Today, but hopefully that changes soon. But I would also say that, as I mentioned in the earlier part of the conversation, a lot of the gradient-free approaches do not necessarily require you to have access or are not necessarily tied to the weights of the model. So even if you don't have access to the weights, I think you can still do a lot of these adaptation at inference time. If you have access to weights, it opens up certain strategies. And if we ever come to a point where we feel that is a limitation for us, then we certainly have the capability to also do our own foundation models from ground up.
Oh, that's expensive. But
It is expensive, which is why that's not the first thing that we want to do. But yes, I think if it makes sense for us, then definitely an option.
so the adaptation, right? So right now, so we have we're like a couple years into these reasoning models and now multimodal models. They're great, but obviously token economics is
Yeah.
not great. And that's why people have been using all sorts of routing logic to make sure that they only use reasoning when they need to. So I'm assuming one of the benefits of adaptation is it will help me save money.
Yes. So I think, as I also mentioned earlier, I think one of the dimensions of adaptations is proportional allocation of compute based on the task complexity. So if I want to just, write a one paragraph copy, I shouldn't have to trigger a reasoning model that thinks for a couple of minutes to write that small copy. If I have to do something which is like much more complex, then yes, it makes sense. And as users, we shouldn't have to also spend a lot of time thinking or tweaking to adjust that compute allocation based on the difficulty. So one of the benefits of adaptation is it abstracts that decision away from the user and takes care of proportional allocation of compute based on the task complexity.
So the foundation models are a black box. The routers are somewhat of an additional black box. Adaptation is another black box. So will adaptation impact transparency, interpretability, diagnostics, compliance?
Proprietary foundation models are black boxes. There's obviously like the open ecosystem. Adaptation itself, I think it solves a user problem of abstracting away complexity of adaptation from the end user. So I think there's value that is provided there. I would say so black box versus white box.
I'm in a regulated industry. I need to be able to explain.
Yeah, so that goes more into, I guess, exercising control and various deployment strategies, which having worked in the space, I'm very aware of, which is also like top of mind for us, right? It's possible to do these adaptations in a manner that is very compliant with the security requirements of various sectors. But I would say that black box versus white box is usually an ask for exercising control, right? People want white box because they want to be able to control the behavior. And our
trust.
fundamental
Trust.
Yes, trust and control. So trust, I guess, can be solved through deployment strategies if nothing actually leaves the perimeter of their if no information needs to leave and yet the model continuously improves, then the trust problem is partly solved, and the control is solved because our fundamental belief is in actually enabling users to have more control and making it easier for them to have that control by exposing the right knobs at the right level of abstraction.
But what if I want to be able to determine, okay, so the adaptation is using a smaller model in this case, but a more expensive model in this case. Is that the kind of thing that your system will be able to tell me?
I think the idea behind adaptation is that you shouldn't have to actually worry about it either, right? So the system made that decision for you, and unless the system actually made a wrong choice, if it did make a wrong choice, then we should have like some feedback loop for you to actually correct that. But
usually you want to know because of trust, diagnostics, right? So incident response, but trust is a big thing because users want to understand how a system works. So at least some users, right? So.
Yeah, so I think some users might, and I think it's just solvable more from a product point of view by having the appropriate deployment strategies, which enables the system or exposes appropriate visibility into what the internals of the systems are.
So it's an adaptive interface, not a chat box?
It's not. I think the fundamental thesis behind adaptive interface is different tasks can require different interfaces, which are the most natural fit for the information corresponding to that task to be presented in a seamless interface. And we want to be able to present that information in a manner that is appropriate to the task. And again, like going back to this feedback loop, that interface itself is an important point of enabling the user to provide the feedback in a seamless manner to enable continuous learning as well.
So the one of the ideas behind adaptation is that it will evolve and improve and continuously learn, right?
Yes.
So does that mean then I don't have to invest that much in monitoring, observability? Because if I trust the system,
I would say it's still, I think those are kind of like orthogonal concerns, right? So you can still trust a system and you still want to actually monitor and observe the behavior of the system. I think if it really depends on, so I think that's more of a, I guess, service management prism of looking at things. And I
Or
still think,
basically retain everything you're doing now, and then this is one way for you to kind of see if this adaptation is working, if it actually is delivering, because you have
yeah.
kind of a baseline of what your metrics are showing, and then let's see what the adaptation is producing, right?
Yes, absolutely. But also, I think there's a lot of observability and monitoring, as well as like evaluation systems and companies who are trying to solve those pieces of the problem. And I think it's obviously like complementary to what we are doing, and we try to integrate with some of these partners in the ecosystem when it makes sense for us to do so.
So you and Sarah obviously helped enterprises with AI and foundation models, right? So, and then you kind of decided, all right, so we're going to start a company built around the notion of adaptation, based on a body of research, Sarah and others. But there must have by now, are there by now, Sudeep, actually practical use cases in production of adaptation? Set aside what you and your company are trying to build, like inside Google or somewhere. So is adaptation more than just research at this point?
Yes, I would say actually some of these techniques are already implemented, especially within like the frontier research labs, possibly behind the APIs, and they're already implemented there, and people sort of inadvertently use it, but they're not available to a broader class of users, and that's kind of partly the mission of adaptation as well, right? To have a much richer set of these techniques, but also to like productize it and enable access to a broader audience.
Yeah, because I think the impression most people have is that when you type a prompt into one of these chat interfaces, uh, there's some routing already
Yeah.
happening, right? So what you're
Yes.
saying is they're doing more than routing; they're doing uh, adaptation, which is
I
of
think
which routing
there's
is just a subset.
Yes, I think there's some of them. I think some of them are just doing, uh, yeah, I would say these labs are doing some form of adaptation, but I would also say that there's a much richer set of adaptation, as well as a lot of green field for innovating newer techniques that can significantly improve both performance as well as cost of adoption, which we want to invest in on our research and innovation roadmap.
There's also the notion of memory, which has two manifestations, right? So one is on the chat interface. Obviously, the if the chatbot has memory of previous conversations, then it can be more efficient. But now people are also looking at, in the enterprise, there should be some notion of operational memory, which is
Mhm.
basically here's a pipeline or a workflow, uh, a software engineering workflow that worked, and so I have a run book. So the next time someone asks a similar question, why should the model like Claude Code burn through so much tokens trying to reinvent the wheel when someone already has a proven workbook for that pipeline, right? So will adaptation take advantage of memory? Some
I think
notion
there's
of
certain
memory. Yeah.
some notion of memory. Having said that, I don't want to say that we are actually going to be a substitute for RAG, right? So RAG has its own
Yeah.
place. If you have like a corpus of a billion documents or processes or templates that you want to index and
So,
give
so
as
if I
example.
type a prompt, right? So, and you folks take over adaptation. Either you route me to a previous model, or a smaller model, a reasoning model. But then, what if you notice, hey, this is a known thing already in the organization? Is that one of your things, or are you? So you're you sit beside whatever notion of context, memory, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of these things are on like our future roadmap. As I mentioned,
Yeah.
like we're still focused on the first pillar, and we will flesh out some of these things as we start working on the second and the third pillars.
Yeah, interesting. So the status of the company is it's hiring like crazy. Is it
Hopefully not crazy, but yes, we are hiring.
is it remote? Are these positions remote, or do you have to be on site somewhere in the San Francisco Bay Area?
So we actually want to be a global first company because we also realize that a lot of the need for adaptation comes from diverse set of languages and cultural contexts, and we feel like it is important for us to have a diverse workforce in order to be able to cater to those more global requirements, which is why we are hiring across the world. Yeah, most of our open positions are working from anywhere. We are a San Francisco-based company, so will have a significant presence here, but we don't want to limit to just the San Francisco Bay Area talent pool.
And with that, thank you, Sudip.
Thank you so much for having me.